Okoiti Omtatah, the activist, is here with us. Also Charles Kanjama, the advocate, back with us. And former presidential candidate Japheth Kavinga Kaluyu. It is only until tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last day that anybody can challenge the results of the presidential election. Is that okay? Is that right, Charles?
Yes, indeed. 7 days after the declaration of election results, which was on Monday, ends tomorrow. And the registry will indicate at what time they will close the registry. The person who needs to challenge the results has to file a petition in accordance with the Supreme Court rules and also pay the security for cost, which is about £1 million shillings, and the costs of filing the case.
Based on what you've seen so far, do you think it will be challenged within the 24 hours or so we have left?
I expect at least one person to file a challenge tomorrow. And I've been expecting that from the moment the results were declared. But who knows what will happen within the 24 hours? Let's wait and see.
Okay. You actually challenged the presidential election, the fresh presidential election, before the results were announced, Okoiti. On 27th, you are already in court. What are your prayers in this suit?
Well, my prayers are basically that whatever the exercise of 26th of October be declared as not having been an election, and a proper election be ordered. And my grounds for that are two. One is if we accept the 2013 ruling which the IBC was implementing, then the vacation of Raila Odinga as a candidate vacated that election and we should have gone to 138. If that is found not to be the case, then the question will be who nominated the candidates. Because the only place we have a nominated candidate in the Constitution is when you have got a runoff. The Constitution nominates and then it gives you 30 days to hold your election. In Article 140, we are not given 30 days, we are given 60 days. So when you look at other areas in the Constitution where 60 days are provided, you'll get it in 138.8, as read with 138.9. You go to 139.1 and 139.3, they give you 60 days. And you'll find that in this situation, either candidates have died or no candidate was nominated. So it is a necessity that you must nominate. So the question will be, if the Supreme Court decision that says we shall nominate A, B, C, D, and it gives three scenarios, one whereby 1 and 2 have a runoff, where there's a challenge and the first and the second, and where everybody else can run. So if that interpretation of the Article 140 is not binding, then who nominated the candidates we saw purporting to vie on the 26th? So we'll say that because the nullification of an election, you don't nullify the results, you nullify the election. And you have seen even practice from the MPs, when you nullify an MP's election, it's open to everybody else to contest. So we'd have expected that with the nullification, we should have gone and held the nominations, and then anybody would participate, or anybody would fall out. Not that because you participated, you must participate again, and that will be the case. So it's really based on those two issues. And then, of course, there are issues that have come up whereby there was a lot of grumbling in IBC and what have you. The transmission kits were not given. You find the elections were not held everywhere in the country. So there are those kind of things that come in. But basically, the main issues are that who nominated the candidates.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're one of those people who purported to vie, to use his phrase, in this election. Were you satisfied with the election?
The just recent election, yes. I would say that it was appropriate because it was not a matter of the 2013. It was a repeat election. None of the candidates actually objected to it, including Raila, Kenyatta, all of us, because at first there were two candidates that were declared to go forward. So there was no problem with that. We came a little later and we had no problem with that. What the NASA had a problem with was whether there was structuring that were proper with IEBC and all that. The court never found IEBC, they found IEBC structures and some of the systematic problems, not even Shaloba, not even Chebukati or anybody else was found guilty. So they invited everyone Whoever wanted to get involved with the election, they got involved. And those who wanted to stay home, they just exercised their democratic right. Now, I'm hoping those who are filing, they participated in the election, because you have to demonstrate that you are injured in the process of actually the process that we are having of the election. If you did not vote, you are a stranger to the case in the first place. So I'm hoping those who are putting the case through, they were a part of the system that could actually affect their injurious nature.
But he was not a candidate. He was, but you've named him and the 7 other candidates as respondents in your case.
No, just interested parties. My respondents are the IBC and the chairman.
But they're interested parties.
And these were just passengers.
Yeah.
So I have no case against them.
Okay. Yeah. But is that an argument in law that you must show that you were injured in that process for you to contest it?
Yes, you must show that you are injured, but any registered voter can meet that threshold, because an election affects all registered voters. So I think the law, at least after the 2010 Constitution, is clear. If you are a registered voter, just to give a speculative case, you can say that I wanted to vote, but the polling station was not opened in my area. And if you say that, you are injured because you are not allowed to vote, but you are a registered voter. If you are not a registered voter, it will be a challenge. Although we do know that in 2013, there was actually a petition that was filed by civil society organizations. So I think the people who are allowed access to the court are quite diverse under our 2010 Constitution, and there's a sense of allowing anyone who can show that they have a legitimate interest in the outcome of the elections.
What happens if there's more than one petition? For instance, his petition is already out there, and if somebody else tomorrow or several people actually file petitions?
The Supreme Court rules are very clear on that. The petitions will be consolidated and heard jointly. The last petition to be filed is the one that will determine when the time starts running, which means from Monday, assuming a petition is filed then. But I think every petition that qualifies will have to meet the basic threshold test, which is there's already been a declaration of results. You need to show that you're challenging the declaration of results. You need to show that you've paid the security for costs and you've done all the other things that the Supreme Court rules require you to do to become a petitioner.
So it is your argument, Okoiti, that President Kenyatta was not legitimately elected on 26 October?
There was an exercise, not an election.
What do you mean?
People just were moving around and throwing pieces of papers in boxes, but there was no election. So to me, there was no election, so there was nothing that happened. Yep. Under the law, everything was happening outside the law. That's my argument. Because if you don't have, if the 2013, Raila 2013 holds, when Raila came out, that thing should have collapsed, and it should have taken us to 138, and then that nominations. All right. If it doesn't hold, then who nominated these people?
Okay.
Those are the questions.
I actually respectively reject, and disagree, Omtatah, because it was an order by the Supreme Court. We were ordered to have a repeat election, and we had no choice but to satisfy what was ordered. One of them was an election, which was a repeat, and it was to be done within 60 days. Okay. And also, Judge Madowo actually clarified that 2013, we should be in it, and therefore there was no
really quickly, sir.
The Madowo came in the day after the Raila had triggered the interpretation.
It won't matter.
No, it matters a lot, because Raila has a legitimate expectation in law. So when he obeys a law, obeys a court order, he should not suffer any consequences for it. So Madowo came 24 hours later.
Okay.
And the issues of the consequence of Raila's withdrawal were never before Madowo.
The answer is the same. So.
Welcome back. Still sitting here with Okoiti Omtatah, Dr. Japheth Kavinga, and Charles Kanjama. Before we went to break, we were talking about what happens. And let me just finish this because we'll put a pin on it. Whether or not there was an election, which he says everything that happened was outside the law. Charles, I think we've asked you, on this show and other shows, you've been asked this question repeatedly. So let me go at it one more time. Did we have an election on 26th October?
Let me answer this way, Larry. IBC believe we had an election. Jubilee believe we had an election. Those who came out to vote believe we had an election. Some of those who did not vote believe there was an election, but for whatever reason they did not vote. NASA believes there was no election. Their supporters believe there was no election, those who did not come out to vote. It's now the turn for the Supreme Court to tell us whether indeed the exercise that took place satisfied their directions or orders for a fresh presidential election within 60 days.
The Supreme Court couldn't find quorum a day to the election, and it possibly might have said the election was not properly set up. So what if it were to rule that way, but after the election has already happened?
It's quite possible, although my view is that the application or the petition to postpone the election should have been filed much earlier. I wish it was filed 1 week or 10 days before the elections. I was on air in a different channel and I made that proposal that indeed, if anyone wanted to postpone the election, can they go to the Supreme Court early? So the Supreme Court has never determined a petition within 24 hours since it was founded. This would have been the first opportunity. So there are those legitimate voices saying that the judges should have made themselves available. This was a critical matter of national importance. And there are also equally legitimate voices saying the petition was filed a bit too late. The judges could not be convened within 24 hours. But that is neither here nor there. It is spilt milk, let's put it that way. When the court sits to determine the election petition, they will determine all the stages in the process from the date when they said an election should take place. That is from September 1st. They already made it clear that an election is a process, not an event. Anything that happened before, whether it was challenged or not, is open to question in any presidential election petition that is to be filed.
NASA likes to call this that it was a sham election and its outcome cannot be relied on. And in fact, what Raila Odinga said outside the All Saints today was, when people vote, when whichever is declared there, where they vote should be the same one that eventually reflects nationally. And that their concern is not always the case. Do you agree?
Well, the facts speak for themselves. Let me take my good friend Cyrus Jirongo. Cyrus Jirongo's name appears on the ballot before he's gazetted. Then it's gazetted 2 days to an election. When did he campaign? When did he sell his agenda? Take Daktari here. 13 days. You are running against somebody who has been campaigning for 60 days. Where is fairness? So the election is supposed to be fair. Where is fair? Even at that level, where is the fairness? It was like we're just going through motions to validate or legitimize something without really putting, because people have to have a choice. The reason we have got 8 candidates is that they have got a chance to sell their agenda so that you can make a choice. So if these people are just dumped there, and then within a short time this has to happen, you find some, you don't know who is going to be what, corrigenda. So at the end of the day, the whole thing was shambolic. The chairman comes out, says, I cannot guarantee a free and fair election. If the chairman cannot guarantee a free and fair election, why should I go and participate in that? And he never retracted that statement.
He did. On the day he announced the results, he said he was satisfied.
That was after the election, that was after the voting.
Just before he announced the result, he said he was satisfied.
Yes, but he never retracted his statement before people went to the ballot. So when people went to the ballot, they knew that this thing is a sham. Even Chebukati is having a gun to his head. So that's what we're going to do here. That's why to me the thing is shambolic. In fact, it's worse than the other thing that was disqualified.
Mr. Omtatah, I urge you, and I would like to ask you to withdraw your case because there is a higher purpose. I was a part of that case for 26th that needed to let the country move forward because there are higher stakes than just saying there is no election. This is not a joke. The people are losing jobs. I've been in hotels where they are operating at 8% capacity. I've been in restaurants where people have been sent home, all the temporary staff. So the reason why I was in that case is first to move, first to win. Number 2, to make sure that the country goes forward. And therefore, I would like to say that we never complained. The people who came late, as a matter of fact, I went for it like my life dependent on it. It was not a matter of the time, but the range of your message. I think we had a big message, and we even improved the rank. So I think unless we complain the presidential candidate, then the rest would be strangers. So I would like to persuade you kindly to let the nation move forward. And patriotism is calling higher purpose, the good angels of your nature to reconsider this and let us move forward. So, Mr. Omtatah, I want you to come forward on my side.
You have said a very good thing, that people are losing jobs. Yeah. But I don't want people to lose their country.
Yes.
We don't want people to be refugees.
Sure.
Yesterday I was listening to BBC, they were interviewing a professor from Southern Sudan. He says he has put up some small shack, he's trying to do photocopying on the top in a refugee camp. We don't want to get to those situations where a doctor like you will be in a refugee somewhere in Uganda doing whatever. So the issue is that we need a proper sovereignty in an election. It's very important. You know, when you look at our constitution, Article 1 says that the people are sovereign. Article 2 says that everything that is done must be done according to the constitution. Article 3 says that people may exercise their power directly or through the elected representatives. So the election is the vehicle through which the sovereign hands over power to the institutions of government. Now, in 25 constituencies in this country, for whatever reason, an election never happened. So will President Uhuru, if he says he has been elected, go to Nyanza by the force of arms and say, I'm taking over your sovereignty? It's because, just a minute, it's by participating in an election that you get bound to the outcome. When people say we are not participating in this election, and they don't participate, will they use the force of arms? And then you found some very careless statement was made at Bomas, that from where the election has reached, even those people who did not vote, their elections, they cannot affect the outcome. You are simply telling some people that you are negligible. And that has been the problem of marginalization when the Constitution says, hold the election in each constituency.
Mr. Omtatah, that was a deliberate effort to refuse the whole process, get to 290 constituencies, including the diaspora, of course, get to election. Because the people who chose to stay at home, the people who chose not to go for election, they decided to block those who wanted to go for election. And therefore, you cannot say some constitution didn't go. They were prevented. As a matter of fact, because I was part of the process, my voters, some of them were beaten up when they were going to vote. So you cannot say,
yes,
you cannot say that those there's people who they were instructed not to go for election. The NASA said that they have no interest in the election, they don't want to participate. So their job was just to stay at home and watch the election happen, because it's under Chapter 4, to the freedom of choice.
And what do you call that? That's what in English is called a civil war.
No.
When a group of citizens can arise and stand up to the government,
yes,
and tell the government, you are not going to operate here.
Yes.
That's what we call a civil war. It may not have bullets, but that's a civil war, and that's what we must contain and bring the country back to a consensus whereby you can have an election that is binding. And we've had elections in Kenya. Never have you seen a situation whereby a section of the country or a big population does not.
Your answers are good, but for a different question, because we are talking of criminal acts. If we are answering people who are preventing people from going to voting stations, that's a criminal act. And if you do the wrong thing, if you can't afford the punishment, don't do it, because the Constitution actually clears that as that one for us. So we are addressing something good. But as far as 26th election, it happened,
and
I'm asking you kindly to jump on my side.
That's why I called it.
Let this
it
country
takes a
move
bit
forward.
more to persuade me. That's why I called it a civil war.
There's no civil war.
It's a civil war.
What is a civil war?
A civil war is a situation whereby a citizenry rises up and rejects the authority of a government.
Is that where we are heading?
That's where we are. Well, that's where we are, not where we are heading. That's where we are, and that's what we must address and bring this country back.
What do you say sounds very similar to what NASA has been saying? Are you holding brief for NASA?
What does holding brief mean?
Are you working for NASA or on behalf of NASA?
I may agree with them, I may share a viewpoint with them. I'm not working for anybody, I'm always my own man. But I'm holding this position that if it's the position of NASA, it's also my position that there was no election, there was an exercise. A section of this country did not participate for whatever reasons. And when you get a sizable section of the population rising up and stopping a government from executing an action or a program, that's a civil war. And that's what we must walk back away from. There may be no bullets flying, but basically the seeds of a civil war have been planted, and we must get back out of that.
This time, the civil war would mean one group of people against the other. 50%, they are not interested in they are interested in moving forward. They are not interested in fighting. So the only civil war that you can talk about is about one group.
When Museveni began, there were only 26 people.
The only civil war can exist would be between one group of people that would be interested in violence and police, because the other group is not interested. So there is no civil war.
Let me pick it up from there, Charles, because he mentioned marginalization, and it's because of those maybe historical injustices they see that regions of the coast. Governor Kingi and Governor Joho have said the coast should secede. It's a call that had died but is now back again. Is because of this exclusion and marginalization that he talks about. Do they have legal ground?
There is a legal route in the Constitution for anyone who wants to change either the structure of government or the structure of the country. And that involves amending the Constitution and a popular referendum of all Kenyan citizens. I think, Larry, we saw what has happened recently in Spain, where one region of the country decided to unilaterally secede or break up from the rest of the country, contrary to the Constitution. All the organs of the Spanish Constitution, the Supreme Court, the police, the central government, the national parties came together to fight against that attempt. They dissolved the regional government of Catalonia. They organized for fresh elections within 2 months. So I think Kenya has a similar situation where regardless of how much you agitate, and I think there's been a decision of the High Court in Kenya in the case of the Mombasa Resistance.
Mombasa Republican Council.
Republican Council, yes, which said that people have a right to agitate for any democratic goal that they seek for, so long as they do it peacefully and they strive through constitutional means. So if the people at the coast want to start talk of secession, in my view, it is imprudent, but the Constitution does not stop them from doing so, so long as they do it in accordance with the law and the Constitution.
Every time this comes up, Jubilee and the people who agree with them say this is treason, thinking of breaking up parts of the country. Is it treason?
Section 40 of the Penal Code defines treason, and treason has 2 elements. The first element is to compass, imagine, devise, or plan either the death of the president or to engage in an act that destroys the country. And the second is to implement it. The definition of treason of necessity is to do something that is outlawed. For example, you want to assassinate the president. For example, you want to start a guerrilla war or movement. That kind of action would be treason. But in the 2010 Constitution of Kenya, to say that we are being marginalized, we think would be better on our own, on its own does not constitute treason. If you send people to Boni Forest, or if you start a message of let's expel the people from the internal part of the country, then that would probably become criminal, because now you are violating other people's rights and freedoms.
Does calling for secession equal to wanting to overthrow a lawfully elected government?
Calling for secession does not equal to wanting to overthrow a lawfully elected government, but in the process of calling for secession, you may end up pushing for overthrow of a lawfully elected government. So calling for secession by itself is not the same thing as treason, but it could involve elements of treason depending on how you do it. My view is that if you are just saying we are tired of this country, we want to move to another country, that's what the local parties in Catalonia were doing for several years in Spain, the Basque region in Spain. That's what the Scottish National Party was doing in Scotland for decades. That on its own does not constitute treason. It becomes treason when you start trying to use unconstitutional methods to accomplish that separation.
I don't believe, in respect for way, I don't believe Kenya has similar situation with Spanish community, in the sense that that community had all groups, most of the groups of the government, social society, and even the people fed up in some way. So there was an overpowering wave. But in Kenya, you have 2 main, groups, one which is NASA and Jubilee, and I believe mine is the independent candidate. They brought some few more people. But the government doesn't have a problem. People who are aligned to Jubilee are not and do not have a problem. I'm an independent candidate, and I have to say it the way it is. We cannot have a situation where people want to overthrow the government when a half doesn't want to do it.
They're not trying to overthrow the government, Dr. Kavinga. They feel excluded by the current setup. That is why they want a right to self-determination, which they feel might work better for them.
And I agree with you, Larry, because I think people should be considered. These people are not just making noise. there is a need to listen to all sides.
So do you support the call for secession by the coast leaders?
The answer to that question is no, because it is a complicated matter. It is a sweet story. It is a running story to do, because we want to be alone. We are fed up with those people who have a different opinion. We have economic, social, political, environmental, and a lot of trade things that have to be considered. This is a very serious matter, but it contributes to a very sweet story, which is almost impractical. It takes a lot of years.
This is often seen as a solution to years of economic exclusion, marginalization, like you talk about. Is this an easier way to go about it, as opposed to maybe trying to contest this in court? NASA said they will not go to court, but they're looking at the People's Assemblies as one of the other ways to, they say the People's Assembly will be in effect until a legitimate presidency. Is there?
Before I answer, I want to point out that you have answered yourself, that NASA said they will not go to court. I mean, I've gone to court, therefore I don't speak for them.
True.
I'm not holding a brief for
I'm
them.
not asking you as
Okay. No.
I'm not asking you I'm asking.
So I've answered that one. Now, when I come back, I say that what people are saying, people don't hate to be part of Kenya. But they're saying, can we be Kenyans as equals? And there are many things that are causing this feeling of disillusionment. I've heard some idiots, and I'm using that word deliberately, saying that we fought for this country. I'm telling you, in my village, there was no Mau Mau in my village. There's been a false narrative of Mau Mau that is creating a super class of citizens, and the rest of us are at a lower tier. You go to Mombasa, you had Mekatilili wa Menza. They fought, they resisted, we have got them, and that is resisted, we don't tell you any Kisi. But somehow, the narrative of Kenyan's independence was distorted. And we got something called Mau Mau, which has now become the national narrative. We even now have in Uhuru Park, there's a monument to Mau Mau there, which continues to bring that lie, that somebody fought for this country and another person did not fight for this country. So unless we go back and ask ourselves, what is the true story of Kenya? Are
you saying that Mau Mau's efforts in the fight for independence have been overstated compared to other communities?
These people were defeated in 1952, and we got independence 12 years later. What I appreciate is that the peasant did stand up for his piece of land, for his rights. But it was not fought as a national liberation movement to say that we are demanding this, we are demanding that we are going to acquire this. So to me, and that narrative for me is what is the original sin of the Republic of Kenya. We must get that story correct. We must put all citizens at par. You know, somebody told me that we have got, you know, that kind of attitude is to me the problem that we have. We must face it, and we must say that all Kenyans are equal, and we must recognize heroes from everywhere, beginning with the coast, where they resisted the Griama's wars, were resisted, going down even to the Chetambe, things like the Bukusus, going down to the Kisi, to the Kikuyu, whatever. Once we get all that whole narrative together, where we show that there were individual resistances to occupation, then we shall be liberating this country. Okay. But the effort for independence was fought at a much higher tier. Kenya did not win independence the way Mozambique won independence. In fact, had it not been for the Mau Mau, maybe we would have gotten independence much earlier with the likes of Ghana, and maybe ahead of Tanzania and Uganda. Oh. So there were all those issues that were there, and we must address the Mau Mau story, and the marginalization is very true. Before CDF, I come from Busia, we never had a meaningful primary school or a college. It's because of the little CDF that has come in that now you are seeing projects coming up. With devolution, you are seeing projects coming up.
Okay.
So we need to complete the devolution, we need to mainstream everybody, and make all Kenyans equal. And we forget these lies we are telling each other.
Full disclosure, you ran for senator in Busia.
Yes.
On, I believe, an ANC ticket.
No. I ran on a Ford Kenya.
You ran on a Ford Kenya ticket.
I was with Jaramogi. Even when Raila left for the Kenya, I remained with Jaramogi for the Kenya.
All right. And then two, I get your point of view about the Mau Mau, but I think it's a bit of a revisionist history to say that they were defeated in 1952 and they didn't do any work after that. I don't want to argue the history with you, but I think that historians who might have a different account of that.
Let me interject here and say, it could be, Mau Mau's story could be correctly stated. The opposite could also be true, that it is understated about the other people who actually participated. So the question should probably not be to understate it or to correct it because it is accurate. We just need to raise the other awareness of other people. So Mau Mau, whether I think it is correctly done because the story is well reported, but we need probably to raise the awareness of other people, and it is not a matter of seeing other people as less.
But they never fought for Kenya.
They fought for
What do you
Kenya.
mean?
There was no Mau Mau in Garissa. There was no Mau Mau in Busia.
Everybody was fighting for Kenya.
Yes,
Mau Mau
so
and
everybody
other
was fighting.
people
So when you talk about the collective polity called Kenya,
Yeah.
we must recognize the effort of everybody made. But not to take one community and say these are the ones who fought for this country, they own this country, they have got a greater rights than Omtatah who comes from Busia.
As a matter of fact,
No way, because I sit on a bus for 8 hours. Kampala is only 4 hours from my home. But I sit on a bus for 8 hours to come to Nairobi because I am a Kenyan. I don't go to Kampala, I'm not a Ugandan.
Yeah.
So that has to be realized.
As opposed to fighting against the Mau Mau statement, why don't we raise the awareness of those who have not been shown to participate? I think it is probably a flip-flop fight. We need to fight for the other opposite side. I join you to highlight I'm a professor, like I think probably like you, we highlight the other side, but stop because the other side has been correctly stated and it has been cleared, preached, we stop fighting it and we raise the bar on the
I'm not fighting it, I'm just saying that there has to be universal recognition that there was a
all
collective
the efforts
effort that
in this fight for Kenya.
You cannot take one and make it the Bible.
Agreed.
And all the other narratives become the heretics.
Everybody else who fought for the country. I think that point has been made. Yes, sir, in conclusion.
Larry, very soon after independence, Jomo Kenyatta actually made the point. There are some who don't realize that Jomo Kenyatta himself was never Mau Mau. And after Kenya became independent, he made the point that all Kenyans fought for independence in one way or the other. We cannot just focus on one group and exclude the rest. I think the issue comes when you have competition for power that is aligned on the basis of ethnicity. Then each ethnic group starts focusing on where they think they are superior to the other. Okay. My belief, though, is that the 2010 Constitution, at least when you look at the merits of the 2010 Constitution, was to address several of these historical challenges by coming up with a national social contract that involved elements of devolution, incorporating things of the need for ethnic and regional diversity in the national government, in the county governments, in the public service. It's still a work in progress. There are many weaknesses in the implementation of that constitution. But I think for now, that is the starting point, because the process we went through, which was very elaborate from the Bomas draft, before that with the National Council Executive Committee, to come up with the 2010 Constitution, incorporated an element of reflection on our history. We also know that there is a question of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Committee or Commission, and the report they came up with, again trying to reflect on historical issues. And I think that should be a work in progress. What happens is that every 5 years the politicians bring this issue to sharp focus, they divide us, the divisions become deeper, but you notice they always happen every 5 years, and after 5 years, somehow we move on to other agenda items. Maybe that is a problem, maybe we paper our differences and we need to focus on them a bit more, but I think there's also an overemphasis by the political class every 5 years, because that's the way to win power, by dividing yourself from the rest, by securing your voting base.
All right. You know, I've had one argument. I've had one historian at least say that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was more Mau Mau than Jomo Kenyatta. So it's an interesting historical perspective you brought in here that I don't want to start all over again, because you seem quite passionate about this.
Let me say this. Jomo Kenyatta was imprisoned in 1952, when the repression against Mau Mau started, and it was after the declaration of the state of emergency, the Operation Jock Scott, that there was a reaction, and many people joined Mau Mau thereafter. But when you read the memoirs of Bildad Kagia, and he talks about the Kapenguria Six, it becomes very clear that they were divided neatly down the middle. 3 of them were pro-Mau Mau, and in fact had got involved in Mau Mau. He was one of them. I think Aching Oneko was one. And Jomo Kenyatta was on the other side. So they had a philosophical division. And actually those who are pro-violence did not like Jomo Kenyatta because they considered him a pacifist.
Okay.
The truth is that Mau Mau contributed substantially to bring forward the independence of Kenya. Kenya was a country which historically had settler communities like Southern Africa. And before the Mau Mau War, the settler community and the British were talking about independence in a generation, which would have been around 1970s or 80s. Thanks to the cost that was incurred in the administration because of Mau Mau, even though Mau Mau was defeated, as Omtatah says, it was not defeated in 52. It was defeated over a number of years.
All right.
The British started thinking that we need to bring forward the independence of Kenya.
And it was defeated partly because the British settler government suppressed it very violently. So in a way that did not allow them to be able to thrive and carry out its activities.
And with the use of home guards.
And with the use of home guards.
And if I may qualify it that...
We're doing a whole history lesson here. Yes, sir, really quickly.
I've personally been to Nyeri. I've lived in those families. I've gone to the caves. I've gone to whatever has happened. I've even gone and touched the place where Dedan Kimathi was killed. And I recognize that struggle. But it should not be weaponized.
Okay, fair enough.
As a tool for internal colonization.
I have to wrap up, sir. I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier, that the country needs to move on.
Yes.
And you called on his patriotic side to see that. But are you saying that we need to move on at the expense of finding credible process? Because the election, like the Supreme Court said, is not an event. It is a process. Even if the process is messy, we should just move on for patriotism? No, is that your argument?
Larry, that's a very important question. Actually, it's really the heart of what is happening in the country right now. Should we move? What is this moving on about? I think there are many channels to address the current issues of interest. We have to put the country first in the... We have made elections about the leaders, and shame on us, because it is about the people who we lead. I would like the people, the leaders, to actually create the capacity to move forward, because the businesses are suffering, people are losing jobs, those who are leading and all that. So those issues, I said, the opposition and an independent country, not one way or the other, but we need to move forward on the...
They're playing the music, sir. That means I really need to go, so really finish.
So I'm saying that the country needs to move forward on behalf of the people and for the sake of Kenyans.
Gentlemen, I have to say thank you so much for coming on tonight. Okoiti Omtatah, Dr. Japheth Kavinga Kaluyu, and Charles Kanjama.
I would like to call on President Uhuru Kenyatta to withdraw the statement he made that circulates on social media, where he says that the Kalenjin and the Kikuyu fought for this country, and the Kenyans and the voted him in power, and he will share he needs to withdraw that statement and bring the country back.
No, we will leave it there. Thank you so much. That concludes our history lesson. Join us again next Sunday for history part 2.